You know, last summer, I got a call from a national media organization inviting me to come to a very secret event that was being planned by an aerospace company. And they said they were going to launch the first civilian flight to the moon. And they wanted me to come along as a kind of observer, a content provider, to write about the experience. And I couldn't believe it. It was like a dream. I kept saying, to the moon? To the moon? And they said they couldn't tell me exactly where or when it would be because security was very, very tight. And they said, we'll call you back, and we'd appreciate it if you don't mention this to anyone. And I said, of course, I understand, absolutely, you can count on me. And I hung up the phone and waited for about 5 minutes. Then I called 5 friends. I said, you won't believe this, but I just got this call, and I have been invited to go to the moon. And I told them about how the first civilian flights are going to be starting in 4 years, and how they're going to orbit the moon in a reusable craft, and that they have all these plans to build resorts and retirement colonies there for old people who are losing their mobility, and how great it's going to be for handicapped people who can suddenly do somersaults and free fall, and what the new zero-G sports are going to be like, and the new zero-G dance companies. And when I stopped talking, I just heard this silence on the other end of the line. I don't think any of my friends believed me at all. It's like after the big Cold War race to the moon was over, everybody just sort of forgot the moon was even up there. 2 weeks later, they called again and said, liftoff is in approximately 1 month, so we want you to just be more or less on the alert. Can't tell you anything more. And I thought, gee, shouldn't I be doing some sort of training for this? I mean, you just climb on board? And I started having nightmares that I was a lifeguard on the moon. And people and things kept getting yanked out into space in this lunar riptide. And I had to keep going out there and rescuing them. And in other nightmares, I was on the moon, looking back down at the Earth, and thinking about how billions of years ago, the moon had been sheared away from the Earth, and how it left this big gaping hole that filled with water and became the Pacific Ocean, and how the moon keeps pulling on the Earth, trying to get back. The next call was 2 days later, and they said the flight was proceeding on schedule and that it was going to be a very important simulation. And I said, what do you mean, simulation? You mean we're not going up? And they said, actually, this was not going to be an active launch, and they hoped there hadn't been any misunderstanding there. But the deal was that we were just going to sit on the ground in a capsule, pretending we were going to the moon. But they emphasized that this was a really important scientific project because they wanted to know whether this flight could be considered a vacation. Would it be relaxing? Would people want to go more than once? And they kept repeating that I was the perfect person to try to analyze the situation. Now, I really don't know why they picked me for this. I mean, I myself don't have any vacation skills at all. And partly this is genetic. My Swedish ancestors are really a pretty gloomy bunch. They get fun completely backwards. So if they go to a funeral where they're supposed to be sad, they find this very easy. It comes pretty naturally. So this makes them very happy. But when they're invited to a party where they're supposed to have fun, they find this incredibly difficult. And so they get even more depressed and sad. Anyway, I finally arrived at the simulation, determined to have fun, or at least to analyze whether other people were having any. Now, the day of the blast-off, they were playing the theme from 2001, on a ghetto blaster. And the 8 people chosen for the flight lined up to enter the craft, which was made of sheetrock and plywood and blinking lights. And for 4 days, we monitored their every move with microphones and cameras. Now, every few minutes, Mission Control would give them bits of information about where they supposedly were in space. And the flight crew kept giving them little jobs to do that had to be prefaced with the exact military time. 400 hours, humidity nominal, pressure nominal, thrust 0.478. And they had to memorize all of these paramilitary commands and rules and repeat specs on things like liquid nitrogen. And every 2 hours, they were given questionnaires. Things like, do you feel this is a good vacation so far? Do you find this flight relaxing? How do you feel about your fellow passengers? Has your opinion of them changed since the last questionnaire? And it was all so incredibly claustrophobic. Now, if you can imagine being trapped in a parked station wagon for 4 days with your family, answering questions every 2 hours about how much you like them, this would give you some idea of the excitement level inside the capsule. You know, 20 minutes would go by, and someone would say, do you want another Pop-Tart? No, thanks. And we wrote all of this down. And with every hour, the capsule looked more and more like the day room in a mental ward. And finally, after 4 days, the passengers came out of the capsule, and they were playing the 2001 theme song again. And I thought we'd all be in a really bad mood after following all these rules for 4 straight days. But instead, they were all saying things like, you know, this experience in space has really changed my life. I just see things differently now. Just to be up there in the middle of all those stars. It was awesome. I felt so small. And I thought, this is amazing. I'm seeing the incredible power of the human imagination. And this is why humans will survive. We'll survive because we're basically completely insane.
You know, when I ran a civilization for several years, a civilization of 300 to 400 wonderful men. We had our own laws, we had practically our own constitution, and I was the sovereign for a good bit of that. And I tried to analyze human predicaments in that microcosm of life in the world. You've got to have leaders, and I fell out there, who can do this with their bare hands, with working with people on the scene.